It was a stormy night, and Jessica was driving down a long stretch of deserted highway. The rain was relentless, hammering against her windshield, and her wipers barely kept up. She was tired from hours of driving but determined to make it to her grandmother's house by morning. About halfway through the journey, Jessica noticed headlights in her rearview mirror. A black sedan was trailing her closely. She increased her speed, but the car stayed on her tail, its headlights glaring into her mirror. Frustrated and a little uneasy, she muttered, "What's your problem?" After a few miles, the sedan pulled into the left lane and began to pass her. Jessica glanced over and froze. The driver's seat was empty. No one was in the car. Panicked, Jessica slammed on the brakes, letting the sedan speed ahead. As it disappeared into the darkness, she tried to rationalize what she'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or the driver was ducked down for some reason. She pressed on, but her nerves were frayed. A few miles later, she spotted something up ahead flashing hazard lights. It was the black sedan, stopped in the middle of the road. The hood was up, and steam billowed into the rain. Jessica slowed her car, unsure of what to do. As she approached, she saw the driver's side door creak open, but no one got out. Her gut screamed at her to keep going. She swerved around the car, her tires screeching on the wet pavement. In her rearview mirror, she could see the door slowly closing, as if an invisible hand pushed it shut. Breathing heavily, Jessica turned on the radio to distract herself. Static filled the speakers. She fiddled with the dials, and a faint voice broke through. "You're next." Her heart stopped. The headlights behind her flickered on. The black sedan was back, barreling toward her at an impossible speed. Jessica screamed and floored the gas pedal, but her car wouldn't accelerate. The engine sputtered and died as her headlights dimmed, leaving her stranded in darkness. The last thing she saw was the black sedan's headlights flooding her car before everything went dark. The next morning, Highway Patrol found Jessica's car, abandoned and empty. Nearby drivers reported seeing a black sedan speeding down the highway with no one behind the wheel. Lena was driving cross-country, eager to make it to her sister's new house by sunrise. The road was desolate, flanked by endless trees, and her playlist had run out hours ago. She had been on the road so long, her eyelids felt like lead. When she saw a sign for a rest stop 2 miles ahead, she decided it was time for a quick break. The rest stop was old and eerily quiet. A single fluorescent light flickered above the entrance, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and cleaning chemicals. The only sound was the faint hum of a vending machine. She grabbed a bottle of water and made her way to the restroom. The dimly lit hallway leading to it seemed to stretch longer than it should. Something about the place set her on edge, but she chalked it up to exhaustion. Inside the restroom, the flickering light above the mirror made her reflection look distorted. She splashed water on her face, trying to shake the creeping unease. As she reached for a paper towel, she heard a soft tapping noise. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, coming from one of the stalls. "Hello," Lena called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She crouched down to look under the stall doors. Empty. Her heart pounded. The tapping grew louder, faster, as if something or someone was trying to get her attention. Panicking, she backed out of the restroom and hurried down the hallway, but it seemed to stretch forever. The light flickered more intensely, casting shadows that darted unnaturally across the walls. When she finally burst outside, the cool night air hit her like a slap. She sprinted to her car, locking the doors the moment she got in. Her hands shook as she turned the key, but the engine wouldn't start. A shadow moved in the corner of her eye. She turned her head to see a man standing just outside the passenger window, his face obscured by the flickering light. He didn't move. He didn't knock. He just stared. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she fumbled for her phone. When she looked up, the man was gone. Suddenly, a whisper came from the back seat. "You should have stayed inside." Lena's car was found the next day, abandoned at the rest stop. The driver's seat was empty, but the passenger window was shattered, and bloody handprints trailed into the woods. How was that? Want me to keep the creep factor rising? Marcus had been driving all night, the long, empty highway stretching endlessly before him. A thick fog rolled in, blanketing the road in a ghostly white. His headlights barely cut through the mist, and he gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. As he rounded a bend, he spotted a figure on the shoulder of the road, barely visible in the fog. A hitchhiker. They were waving slowly, their arm moving in an almost hypnotic motion. Marcus hesitated. He was usually wary of picking up strangers, but the person looked desperate, drenched from the damp night, their silhouettes slouched. Against his better judgment, he pulled over. The hitchhiker approached the car, and as they got closer, Marcus could make out their features. It was a woman, her face pale and hollow, with dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes were torn, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Thanks," she said softly, sliding into the passenger seat. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Where are you headed?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Just up the road," she replied, staring straight ahead. They drove in silence, the tension in the car palpable. Marcus couldn't help but glance at her occasionally. Something about her seemed off. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and she never blinked. After a few minutes, she broke the silence. "Do you believe in ghosts?" she asked, her voice flat and emotionless. Marcus chuckled nervously. "Not really." "Why?" She turned her head slowly to face him. Her eyes, now sunken and dark, seemed to pierce through him. "Because you just picked one up." Marcus's heart stopped. He slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a halt. When he turned to look at her, the passenger seat was empty. Breathing heavily, he got out of the car and looked around. The fog was thicker now, swirling around him like a living thing. He saw faint footprints leading away from the car, bare feet, disappearing into the mist. Shaking, he climbed back into his car and sped off. But no matter how far he drove, the fog didn't lift, and the road seemed to loop endlessly. That's when he saw her again, standing on the shoulder, waving. Marcus's car was later found on the side of the highway, engine still running. The driver's seat was empty, but a faint voice echoed in the fog. "Do you believe in ghosts?"